By late 1943, the air war over Europe had reached a critical juncture. The Allies had long relied on strategic bombing to cripple Germany's industrial heart. Cities like Hamburg, Berlin, and the Ruhr Valley were under constant aerial assault, their factories and rail networks relentlessly targeted. But these bombing campaigns were costly. Bomber crews faced a deadly gauntlet of flak, radar-guided defenses, and the ever-present Luftwaffe interceptors. Casualties mounted. The need for a long-range fighter capable of escorting bombers deep into enemy territory became urgent. The P-51 Mustang had been born from necessity and ingenuity. Initially conceived for the British in 1940, its airframe was sleek, with laminar flow wings that reduced drag and enhanced high-speed performance. But early models, powered by the Allison V1710 engine, lacked the ceiling and speed to match the Luftwaffe's best. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, above 20,000 feet. European skies demanded more. The turning point came with the integration of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, originally developed for the Spitfire. The Merlin's two-stage supercharger allowed the Mustang to climb faster, maintain high-speed performance at altitude, and engage German fighters on more equal terms. Suddenly, the Mustang was no longer just a capable fighter. It was a platform that could dominate the European theater when paired with the right fuel. Fuel, often overlooked in discussions of aerial performance, became a silent but decisive weapon. Standard aviation gasoline of the era allowed engines to operate within known limits, but pushing the Merlin to its potential required something stronger. High-octane fuel, specifically 150-grade avgas, enabled sustained high-output operation, turning the Mustang's engine into a machine capable of unprecedented speeds, 490 miles per hour in level flight. Allied engineers had meticulously tested blends that increased power without catastrophic engine failure, a delicate balance between chemistry and mechanical endurance. At the same time, intelligence reports underestimated the impact this new fuel grade would have. German reconnaissance had observed the Mustang, noted its improved speed, but assumed incremental performance gains rather than a revolutionary edge. Luftwaffe strategists prepared for engagements using their existing doctrine, expecting familiar limitations. They did not anticipate a fighter capable of chasing them on equal terms, and then outpacing them entirely. By early 1944, the first operational units of P-51Ds equipped with Merlin engines and 150-grade fuel began escorting bombers over Germany. Crews reported dramatically improved acceleration, climbing ability, and agility at altitudes where Allied bombers operated. For the first time, American formations could sustain long-range missions without the crippling losses that had defined earlier raids. Pilots described the Mustang as a different beast entirely, a combination of raw speed, precision handling, and near-impossible survivability against standard Luftwaffe tactics. The development of this fuel was not merely a laboratory achievement. It reflected a broader shift in Allied strategy. Air superiority had become inseparable from technological advantage. Every detail, from engine tuning to fuel chemistry, was scrutinized to maximize output while maintaining reliability. Ground crews labored in secrecy, often in freezing hangars, blending additives and testing for octane stability. The work was invisible to the public eye, but it would prove decisive. By mid-1944, the P-51's dominance in the air was unmistakable. Fighter pilots who had once feared German interceptors now spoke with cautious confidence, knowing their machines could outpace and outmaneuver nearly any threat. Yet, while the technology was sound, the story of the 150-grade fuel remained largely classified. Only a select group of engineers, commanders, and pilots understood the full extent of the Mustang's newfound capabilities. As Allied bombers prepared to penetrate deeper into Germany, the combination of aerodynamic refinement, Merlin engineering, and advanced fuel would tip the scales. The Luftwaffe, caught in the false assumption that the Mustangs were still limited by previous engine constraints, would soon discover that the skies they once controlled were no longer their own. This evolving balance of power set the stage for a confrontation not just between pilots, but between innovation and expectation, a moment where chemistry, engineering, and courage would collide at 30,000 feet. The question remained: how would German pilots and commanders react once these new, Faster Mustangs arrived over their heartlands. The introduction of 150-grade aviation fuel represented a subtle revolution in the skies over Europe. At first glance, fuel seemed mundane, an invisible component of the war effort, essential but unremarkable. Yet in the hands of the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, it became a force multiplier. This high-octane fuel allowed the P-51D Mustangs to sustain higher manifold pressures, giving pilots more power without risking engine detonation. In practical terms, the difference was staggering. Climbs became faster, dives sharper, and level flight speeds reached levels that Luftwaffe pilots had not encountered in combat. Testing had been methodical. Allied engineers conducted engine runs at altitude, carefully monitoring cylinder head temperatures and supercharger performance. Ground crews, often under the cover of night to avoid reconnaissance flights, experimented with fuel blends to maintain stability under extreme stress. This was not trial and error. It was precision science. They balanced octane levels, anti-knock additives, and viscosity modifiers to ensure reliability over extended missions. For the men in the cockpit, this meant an aircraft that could climb above German defenses, accelerate past interceptors, and still maintain the endurance. To escort bombers deep into the Reich, the timing of this innovation coincided with the Allies' intensified bombing campaign in 1944, with Operation Overlord underway and the push into France imminent. Long-range escort fighters were vital. Prior to the high-octane fuel, bomber formations were vulnerable beyond 250 miles from England, where Luftwaffe fighter bases could respond swiftly. Now, Mustangs equipped with 150-grade fuel could accompany B-17 and B-24 formations all the way to Berlin and back, a 200-mile round trip that had previously been impossible without catastrophic attrition. Commanders recognized the tactical advantage immediately. For the first time, Allied bombing raids had a realistic chance of returning with most of their crews and aircraft intact. Yet German intelligence was slow to respond. Reconnaissance pilots noted the increasing presence of Mustangs, but they assumed incremental improvements rather than a transformative leap. Luftwaffe planners continued to deploy FW-190s and Bf-109s using tactics developed for earlier Mustang variants. They underestimated the combined effect of engine performance, aerodynamic refinement, and the chemical advantage of 150-grade fuel. In essence, they prepared for yesterday's threat while the Allies were fighting tomorrow's air war. Within the American units, secrecy was paramount. Details about the fuel's composition and the precise performance envelopes of the Mustangs were restricted to pilots and select maintenance crews. A P-51D pilot might know that he could push his engine to 3,000 RPM at high altitude without fear of catastrophic failure. But the Luftwaffe had no such intelligence. This asymmetric advantage created a psychological edge. Pilots learned that their aircraft could outrun, outclimb, and outturn nearly every German fighter in combat, fostering confidence and daring in missions that previously would have been considered suicidal. The German response, when it eventually came, was fragmented. Some Luftwaffe units attempted to deploy newer FW-190D models with higher altitude performance, while others concentrated on flak defenses around key industrial targets. However, these adjustments were piecemeal and reactive, often too late to offset the Mustang advantage. By the summer of 1944, Allied pilots reported encounters where FW-190s and Bf-109s could neither match the P-51 in straight-line speed nor sustain prolonged dogfights at altitude. In many cases, Luftwaffe fighters were forced into defensive retreats, abandoning the bomber formations they had once dominated. This context, technical mastery, meticulous testing, and a miscalculation by the enemy set the stage for dramatic encounters over the skies of Europe. The P-51s, powered by 150-grade fuel, were no longer just escort fighters. They were predators, capable of dictating the terms of engagement. Pilots began referring to the aircraft as demons in silver, a testament to both speed and lethality. As Operation Market Garden, the Normandy breakout, and subsequent raids into Germany unfolded, the Mustang's performance would repeatedly catch the Luftwaffe off guard. German pilots encountered aircraft that could surge past them at will, climb higher, and strike with impunity, altering not only the tactical landscape but also the strategic calculus of the entire air war. The stage was set for a series of aerial engagements that would test human skill, mechanical limits, and chemical engineering. Every sortie would challenge both pilot and machine, and every encounter would reveal the consequences of an intelligence failure paired with a technological breakthrough. This imbalance, the convergence of superior fuel, advanced engineering, and underestimation by the enemy, naturally leads into a multifaceted exploration of the P-51's advantages, from technological marvel to human experience, in the Angles section. The P-51D Mustang was more than a fighter. It was a platform that exemplified the apex of mid-war aviation engineering. At the heart of its capability was the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, an inline V12 originally designed for the Spitfire. While the Merlin had proven itself in British hands, it reached new heights when paired with the Mustang airframe. The Mustang's laminar flow wings reduced drag dramatically, allowing for higher top speeds and smoother high-altitude performance. Combined with 150-grade aviation fuel, the engine could operate at higher manifold pressures, delivering nearly 700 horsepower without catastrophic stress. This technological marriage, airframe, engine, and fuel, was revolutionary. The Mustang could reach altitudes of 40,000 feet and speeds approaching 490 mph, unmatched by standard Luftwaffe fighters at the time. Every component, from the supercharger to the intercooler, had been calibrated to exploit the fuel's energy density. The Merlin engine could now sustain climbs that placed the Mustang above almost all German interceptors, and dives that allowed it to engage or disengage at will. Even at these extremes, engineers had ensured the aircraft's structural integrity, allowing pilots to push the machine hard during combat. Fuel chemistry played an equally critical role. 150-grade avgas was a high-octane anti-knock blend that resisted pre-ignition at high pressures. In the context of air combat, this meant pilots could push throttle and boost settings far beyond what had been previously safe, gaining an immediate speed and altitude advantage. Such performance was invisible until experienced in combat, giving the Allies an asymmetric edge that would define the air war over Europe. The tactical impact of the P-51's enhanced performance was immediate and profound. Prior to their deployment, bomber missions faced severe losses once they reached the Luftwaffe's defensive perimeter. Escorts like the P-38 Lightning or early Mustang variants could only accompany formations partway into Germany, leaving bombers exposed during the most dangerous stretch of their missions. With the combination of Merlin engines and high-grade fuel, P-51Ds could now escort entire formations deep into enemy territory. Strategically, this changed the calculus of air warfare. Mustangs could dictate engagement ranges, choosing when and where to fight. Luftwaffe pilots trained to anticipate dogfights at certain speeds and altitudes found themselves at a disadvantage. The Mustangs could dive through clouds to attack formations, climb above enemy interceptors to strike from unexpected angles, or accelerate away faster than the Germans could pursue. Commanders developed tactics around these capabilities, employing fighter sweep missions ahead of bomber formations to clear the skies before the main force arrived. The tactical doctrine emphasized flexibility. Pilots used the Mustang's high-speed advantage to avoid prolonged turning fights where the German FW-190 excelled. Instead, they relied on boom and zoom attacks, diving from above, firing, and then climbing back to altitude to reset the engagement. This minimized exposure to defensive fire and maximized the aircraft's strengths. Formation flying also evolved. Mustangs operated in tight pairs, alternating as cover for each other while maintaining the ability to exploit the performance envelope created by the fuel-engine combination. Moreover, the Mustang's endurance allowed for long-range patrols and sweeps. This was critical in regions like the Ruhr or along the Rhine, where multiple sorties in a single day demanded both fuel efficiency and performance. High-grade fuel made extended high-power operations sustainable, ensuring that pilots could engage multiple targets over long distances without sacrificing engine health. The result was a new type of air dominance, one not merely based on numbers but on qualitative superiority. The P-51s could control the pace in terms of engagements. Luftwaffe tactics, once optimized for earlier Mustang models, were now obsolete. German pilots discovered too late that these silver demons could appear, strike, and disappear at will, leaving only wreckage and confusion in their wake. For the pilots of the P-51 Mustang, the introduction of 150-grade fuel was transformative, not just mechanically but psychologically. Air combat was already a test of nerve, skill, and endurance, and the presence of a machine capable of outperforming nearly all adversaries fundamentally altered the human experience. Pilots reported an immediate surge in confidence. Where earlier missions had demanded caution, constant scanning for faster or more maneuverable German fighters, now they could dictate engagements. Yet confidence did not equate to complacency. Flying at 40,000 feet, pushing the Merlin engine to near maximum output, and engaging in high-speed dives carried immense risk. The human body was subjected to extreme G-forces, rapid changes in pressure and temperature, and the constant threat of anti-aircraft fire. Pilots needed both technical knowledge and acute awareness, understanding the limits of their aircraft and the peculiarities of the new fuel. Training emphasized precision. One misjudged climb or dive could overheat the engine or push the airframe beyond structural tolerances. Despite the risks, the psychological advantage was palpable. Veteran Mustang pilots spoke of silver lightning in the skies, planes that seemed almost alive, responding instantly to their commands. Survival rates for bomber escorts improved, reinforcing morale across units. Pilots were not merely surviving, they were mastering the air. For the Luftwaffe, encounters with these high-octane fueled Mustangs were shocking. German pilots, long accustomed to tactical superiority at altitude, were confronted by aircraft that could outclimb, outdive, and outpace them with ease. Standard tactics, close-range dogfights, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated formations were suddenly ineffective. Many German pilots found themselves unable to bring their weapons to bear, watching as Mustangs engaged bombers, executed attacks, and disappeared into the sky before they could respond. The element of surprise compounded the effect. Intelligence had tracked Mustang variants, noted performance improvements, yet underestimated the impact of high-grade fuel. Luftwaffe leaders assumed incremental increases rather than revolutionary capability. Pilots were often told to maintain formation cohesion and avoid engagement, but the Mustang's speed advantage made interception nearly impossible. In debriefings, German aviators described a sense of helplessness, machines that appeared faster than thought possible, leaving them in defensive retreat or forcing emergency maneuvers that increased casualties. For Allied commanders, the integration of 150-grade fuel into P-51 operations was both a tactical and strategic decision. Leaders understood that technical innovation alone was insufficient. It had to be leveraged through doctrine, training, and operational planning. Decisions regarding bomber escort strategies, fighter sweeps, and patrol zones were recalibrated to maximize the Mustang's capabilities. Commanders coordinated with intelligence officers to exploit the Luftwaffe's underestimation, deliberately selecting engagement zones that favored high-speed, high-altitude strikes. The leadership challenge extended to logistics. High-grade fuel required careful handling, storage, and distribution to forward airfields. Any mismanagement could reduce performance or endanger missions. Leaders ensured that ground crews were trained, supply lines were secure, and operational secrecy was maintained. The payoff was significant. Commanders could now plan deep penetration raids with a realistic expectation that both pilots and bombers would return safely. At the operational level, leaders leveraged the P-51 strengths to shift the balance of air power. Fighter groups were organized to maintain constant coverage over bomber formations, and missions were timed to exploit periods of reduced Luftwaffe readiness. The combined effect of human skill, machine performance, and command foresight created a synergistic advantage, a force multiplier that reshaped the European air war. Viewed together, these angles illuminate the profound impact of 150-grade fuel on the P-51 Mustang's operational effectiveness. Technological sophistication gave pilots the tools they needed. Tactical innovations allowed them to exploit speed and altitude advantages. Human experience emphasized skill, courage, and adaptability, while enemy reactions exposed weaknesses in planning and assumption. Leadership ensured these elements worked in harmony, converting potential into measurable dominance. Every encounter, sortie, and engagement became a test of this interconnected system. Pilots did not merely fly. They executed precise maneuvers shaped by engineering, fuel chemistry, and tactical doctrine. German forces were repeatedly forced to react rather than act, confronted by an air superiority that seemed preordained. Commanders on both sides had to navigate new realities, adapting or failing to adapt, to the rapidly evolving dynamics of aerial combat. These angles converge toward the moments of confrontation that defined the air war, the decisive battles in which Mustang pilots, operating at the peak of both human and mechanical capability, would turn the tide over Germany, June 21, 1944. The skies over northern France were thick with the roar of engines, the combined sound of hundreds of Allied aircraft, forming a silver tide against the green and brown patchwork of fields below. Operation Frantic, though often overshadowed by the Normandy invasion, had intensified Allied air operations. Mustang pilots, now equipped with Merlin engines fueled by 150-grade Avgas, prepared to escort B-17 flying fortresses on a raid deep into German-held territory. At 25,000 feet, the first P-51s climbed in tight formations. Their Merlin engines hummed, then roared as they reached full boost. Every pilot knew that the secret fuel gave them a speed and altitude advantage that German interceptors had yet to anticipate. Moments later, the first FW-190s appeared over the horizon, silhouettes dark against the morning sun. German pilots assumed they could intercept the bombers as usual, relying on their experience and superior numbers. They had not yet adjusted to the capabilities of the fuel-enhanced Mustang. The engagement began with precision. Mustangs flying in pairs swept ahead of the bomber formations. In a calculated descent, they surged toward the Luftwaffe fighters, the high-octane fuel allowing full throttle acceleration beyond standard limits. German pilots attempted to climb to meet them, but the Mustang's superior rate of climb and speed left them scrambling. Within minutes, several FW-190s were trailing exhaust and smoke, unable to match the Mustang's velocity. The psychological effect was immediate. The Luftwaffe pilots were forced to retreat or risk destruction. The tactical doctrine known as boom and zoom came alive in these moments. Mustangs dived from higher altitude positions, opened fire in short, precise bursts, and then ascended back to the safety of superior altitude. Pilots reported seeing German fighters disappear below them, helpless to respond. The combination of high-speed dives, engine reliability, and extreme maneuverability made the Mustang nearly untouchable. Bombers, once sitting ducks at the mercy of the Luftwaffe, now proceeded toward their targets under the watchful cover of their escorts. One of the most striking engagements occurred near the city of Leipzig. Intelligence had predicted heavy Luftwaffe resistance, yet the Mustang's performance surprised even seasoned Allied commanders. Squadron reports detailed multiple Luftwaffe aircraft, unable to close the distance, leaving formations of bombers untouched. High-altitude dogfights became one-sided. Pilots described the air as a chessboard where only the Mustangs moved with speed and precision. German fighters were constantly reacting, never initiating. In the cockpit, human skill intertwined with mechanical advantage. Pilots had to maintain situational awareness while pushing engines to their limits. High-speed climbs induced G-forces that tested endurance. Dives required split-second adjustments to prevent structural stress, yet the confidence born from experience with 150-grade fuel allowed precision even under extreme conditions. One veteran Mustang pilot later recalled, "We could outpace anything the Luftwaffe threw at us. It felt like we were untouchable, though we knew better than to underestimate them." The Luftwaffe, now fully aware that conventional tactics were failing, attempted to counter with concentrated formations of FW-190Ds, designed for high-altitude interception. The response was too little, too late. Mustangs, using superior acceleration and maneuverability, intercepted formations before they could reach the bombers. Dogfights unfolded at dizzying speeds, yet casualty ratios favored the Allies heavily. In these high-stakes encounters, the combination of engineering, fuel, and pilot expertise transformed potential attrition into air dominance. By late afternoon, reports from multiple squadrons confirmed the extent of the advantage. Luftwaffe losses mounted, while bomber formations remained largely intact. Pilots returned to base exhilarated but exhausted, aware that every sortie now relied on precision, speed, and the hidden power of 150-grade fuel. In a matter of hours, the Mustang had reshaped the dynamics of air combat over Germany. As German planners analyzed the day's losses, they faced a stark reality. The Mustang, previously underestimated, was no longer just an escort. It had become a force that dictated the tempo of engagements, an unpredictable predator in a theater where they had once held dominance. This first wave of decisive encounters set the tone for the remaining months of the air war in Europe, demonstrating the lethal synergy of human skill, mechanical ingenuity, and chemical innovation. Yet these early victories were only the beginning. The ultimate test would come as Mustangs faced coordinated Luftwaffe countermeasures, long-range interception missions, and the relentless tempo of Allied strategic operations. By August 1944, the effect of 150-grade fuel on Mustang performance was impossible to ignore. The Luftwaffe had regrouped and attempted to mount coordinated defensive measures over key industrial centers, such as Dresden, Hamburg, and the Ruhr. Yet despite deploying upgraded Fu-190D and Bf-109G variants, German pilots found themselves consistently outpaced. Mustangs could climb above their reach, engage on favorable terms, and disengage at will, leaving Luftwaffe formations scrambling to respond. One notable engagement unfolded over the skies of the Ruhr Valley on August 12th. Intelligence reported heavy Luftwaffe fighter activity intercepting Allied bombers. P-51 squadrons, fueled with 150-grade avgas, ascended rapidly, forming protective screens above the bomber stream. Within moments, German interceptors attempted to close in, only to find the Mustangs accelerating past them effortlessly. Pilots executed boom and zoom attacks with surgical precision, destroying FW-190s and Bf-109s without exposing themselves to return fire. Bomber crews below watched in awe as their escorts, once vulnerable, dominated the sky. The operational impact was immediate. Loss rates for Allied bombers dropped significantly, sometimes by more than half compared to earlier missions without Mustang cover. These victories were not merely numerical. They reshaped morale and perception. Pilots gained confidence, bomber crews felt secure enough to concentrate on accuracy, and Allied command began planning ever deeper raids into Germany. Meanwhile, Luftwaffe leadership recognized that conventional tactics were failing. German pilots, facing overwhelming Mustang superiority, were forced into desperate measures. Interceptions became increasingly fragmented, often relying on ambushes or massed formations of older aircraft to try to offset the speed disadvantage. Losses mounted, particularly among experienced crews who could not be easily replaced. By September 1944, Luftwaffe reports described the Mustang as a new type of predator, its speed and maneuverability unmatched by previous aircraft in the theater. The combination of engineering, fuel innovation, and tactical doctrine created an air supremacy that had far-reaching consequences. In the skies over Germany, the P-51s dictated when and where engagements occurred. Allied bomber raids, once costly operations measured in hundreds of lost planes, could now be executed with precision and reduced risk. German pilots often found themselves reacting, forced to abandon offensive objectives in favor of defensive maneuvers. Leadership on both sides adjusted accordingly. Allied commanders capitalized on the Mustang's dominance, expanding escort missions further into Germany and coordinating sweeps that neutralized Luftwaffe response before it could form. Conversely, German command struggled with attrition, trying to compensate by deploying newer aircraft and shifting older pilots into high-risk zones. The imbalance highlighted the strategic value of the Mustang beyond individual sorties. It was a tool that altered the very nature of the air war. The human factor remained critical. Mustang pilots, operating at the limit of human and mechanical endurance, carried the knowledge that their aircraft could outmatch any interceptor they faced. Yet the very advantage bred overconfidence in some cases. Pilots learned quickly that mistakes, misjudged dives, improper formation spacing, or engine mismanagement could still be deadly. The fuel provided power, but skill remained indispensable. For every Mustang that returned victorious, there were tales of near misses, mechanical strain, and split-second decisions that saved lives. By late 1944, the pattern was unmistakable. The Luftwaffe had been forced into a reactive stance, increasingly defensive and less able to influence strategic operations. The P-51s, fueled with 150-grade avgas, had achieved a qualitative superiority that was impossible to counter directly. The air war, once a contest of parity, had shifted decisively. Allies could now strike deeper, faster, and with reduced risk, setting the stage for the final months of the European theater. The consequences of this turning point extended beyond immediate air combat. German industrial output faced continued pressure from sustained bombing. Allied morale surged, and the psychological edge of air superiority became a strategic lever. The Mustang had transformed from an escort fighter into a decisive weapon of war, its full potential unlocked by fuel, engineering, and tactical mastery. This crescendo of events naturally leads into the aftermath, where we will examine both immediate and long-term consequences, Luftwaffe losses, bomber survival rates, and the broader strategic impact of these fuel-enhanced Mustangs. The skies over Europe had changed forever. By the end of 1944, the P-51 Mustang, powered by 150-grade fuel, had shifted the balance of air power decisively in favor of the Allies. Reports from bomber groups documented dramatically improved survival rates. Missions that once incurred 20 to 30% losses now often returned with minimal damage. B-17 and B-24 formations, previously exposed to concentrated Luftwaffe attacks, could penetrate deep into Germany with confidence that the deadly gauntlet of German fighters could be met and often neutralized by their silver escorts. Statistical reports confirmed the scale of the transformation. In the summer months, Allied air forces recorded Luftwaffe losses exceeding replacement rates, particularly among experienced fighter pilots. The German military faced attrition not only in men but in morale. Pilots who survived early engagements were often reassigned, transferred to training units, or lost in subsequent missions. The cumulative effect was a force that could no longer challenge Allied bombers with the efficiency it had once maintained. Operational planning shifted accordingly. Allied commanders, emboldened by the Mustang's capabilities, expanded the scope of strategic bombing. Industrial hubs that had been previously deemed too risky were now within reach. Operations targeting synthetic fuel plants, railway networks, and munitions factories proceeded with greater efficiency, reducing Germany's capacity to replenish both material and manpower. In effect, the Mustang's speed and endurance created a protective umbrella under which the Allied air campaign could escalate with unprecedented reach. The psychological impact extended beyond the cockpit. Bomber crews who had long endured dread during deep penetration missions gained confidence in their chances of survival. Reports from airmen described a newfound sense of security, tempered by respect for the risks inherent in combat. One pilot noted, "The Mustang made us feel like we had a fighting chance, not just luck." Such sentiment, while anecdotal, was reflected in mission cohesion, operational effectiveness, and the willingness of crews to fly repeated sorties into heavily defended airspace. German command faced a different reality. Intelligence reports detailing P-51 performance were increasingly alarming. High-speed interceptions failed repeatedly, and attempts to modify tactics or deploy advanced aircraft often came too late to make a meaningful difference. Luftwaffe units were forced to prioritize defense over offense, abandoning ambitious patrols in favor of emergency responses to Mustang sweeps. The result was a loss of initiative, a fundamental disadvantage in a war increasingly defined by rapid, coordinated operations. The fuel innovation itself became a silent but critical factor in these outcomes. 150-grade aviation gasoline enabled sustained high-output performance across multiple missions, ensuring that the Mustang could not only engage enemy fighters effectively, but also maintain operational readiness. Without this technological edge, the Mustang's advantages would have been significantly diminished, and the air war over Europe might have remained more evenly contested. In essence, the first wave of consequences was immediate and measurable: improved bomber survival, Luftwaffe attrition, and enhanced operational reach. Yet even as the Mustangs dominated the skies, these victories foreshadowed broader implications for the final phases of the European theater, setting the stage for both the collapse of German air power and the relentless advance of Allied ground forces. As 1945 approached, the cumulative impact of the Mustang's superiority became unmistakable. The Luftwaffe, already stretched thin by attrition, faced an operational crisis. Experienced pilots were irreplaceable, aircraft production struggled under constant Allied bombing, and fuel shortages hampered training and sorties. The Mustang's combination of speed, maneuverability, and endurance, enhanced by 150-grade fuel, had turned previously manageable engagements into overwhelming losses for the German Air Force. Allied strategic planners capitalized on this advantage. Deep penetration raids on Berlin, the Ruhr, and the synthetic fuel plants of Leipzig were conducted with near impunity. Bomber formations, once at the mercy of German interceptors, now flew under protective screens that allowed precision bombing with unprecedented efficiency. Reports from August to October 1944 indicate that Mustang escorts consistently engaged and neutralized Luftwaffe fighters before they could threaten bomber streams, directly contributing to the collapse of Germany's industrial output and logistical networks. The psychological toll on the Luftwaffe was severe. Pilots described encounters with Mustang formations as demoralizing. "They appear from nowhere, strike and vanish," one Bf-109 pilot reported, "and no matter what you do, they are always faster, higher, and more agile." Morale among German fighter units plummeted, reinforcing the operational advantage. Attrition was no longer just numerical. It was mental. Fear and uncertainty permeated the ranks, eroding cohesion and effectiveness. The strategic consequences extended beyond the immediate air campaign. Reduced Luftwaffe interference allowed Allied ground operations to proceed with fewer interruptions from enemy airstrikes. Supply convoys and troop movements faced less aerial harassment, directly supporting operations such as Market Garden and the final push into Germany. In many respects, Mustang dominance facilitated the broader Allied advance, shortening campaigns that might otherwise have been prolonged by German air resistance. Industrial impact was equally profound. Luftwaffe production, already compromised by bombing, now faced a new layer of pressure: the need to develop aircraft capable of matching the Mustang's capabilities. Attempts to field advanced FW-190D and BF-109G variants arrived too late, often in insufficient numbers, and pilots trained on these models faced insurmountable experience gaps. The combination of technological mismatch, pilot shortages, and logistical constraints meant that even when new aircraft were deployed, they rarely altered the outcome. On the Allied side, the 150-grade fuel remained a closely guarded secret. Its role in enabling the Mustang's dominance exemplified how small innovations could have disproportionate effects on a war's outcome. Engineers, pilots, and commanders understood that success was not solely about numbers of aircraft or sorties flown. It was about precision, chemistry, and integration across the entire operational system. Every mission demonstrated the value of combining human skill with mechanical and chemical ingenuity. By the winter of 1944-1945, the air war had reached a new equilibrium, one defined by Allied initiative, operational confidence, and the near-total degradation of German aerial response. Mustang pilots continued to dominate, escorting bombers, clearing skies, and executing sweeps that left German units in constant retreat. The long-term effect was a collapse in Luftwaffe offensive capability, enabling the Allies to concentrate on ground operations while maintaining uncontested air superiority. In retrospect, the introduction of 150-grade fuel and its integration into the P-51 Mustang program did more than enhance individual aircraft performance. It reshaped operational doctrine, reduced Allied losses, eroded enemy morale, and accelerated the collapse of German resistance in the air. What began as a technical innovation became a decisive instrument in the broader strategic war effort, underscoring the power of engineering, chemistry, and human adaptability in shaping history. These outcomes naturally set the stage for a calm, reflective conclusion, examining what this technological and tactical leap meant for the trajectory of the war, aviation, and human ingenuity. The story of the P-51 Mustang and its 150-grade fuel is a reminder that warfare is as much a contest of innovation as it is of numbers and strategy. A single technical breakthrough, carefully tested, meticulously implemented, and strategically exploited, can ripple across an entire theater of war. The Mustang did not simply outpace German fighters, it reshaped the very nature of aerial combat over Europe, turning escort missions into controlled operations and forcing the Luftwaffe onto the defensive. Beyond statistics and battle reports, there is a human dimension to consider. Pilots trusted their machines to survive impossible speeds and extreme altitudes, knowing that the combination of engineering and fuel chemistry gave them a decisive edge. Ground crews labored in secrecy, aware that their precise work could tip the balance between victory and loss. Commanders coordinated strategies that exploited every advantage, transforming a technical innovation into a strategic lever. Every sortie demonstrated the interplay between human courage, mechanical excellence, and chemical ingenuity, a triad that defined success. The long-term impact of this convergence was profound. Luftwaffe attrition accelerated, bomber survival improved, and Allied air supremacy became a cornerstone of the final push into Germany. Industrial production, morale, and strategic planning all shifted under the influence of what might otherwise have been considered a simple technical improvement. The lesson is clear. In war, innovation can be as lethal as numbers, and foresight in applying technology can rewrite the rules of engagement. Even today, the Mustang's legacy endures, not merely as a plane, but as a symbol of the hidden forces that shape history, meticulous engineering, daring human endeavor, and the invisible but decisive influence of innovation.